Welcome back, authors. In our last video, we introduced the 3 pillars of author branding. Today, we're diving deep into Pillar 1, your author name presentation. Pull out that checklist you downloaded last week because we're about to check off some boxes. Your author name isn't just about what your readers call you. It's your first and most powerful brand asset. Now let's break down why this matters and how to get it right. Let's talk about the psychology of name recognition. You know, when readers look at James Patterson's name on a book cover, they don't just see letters. They see a promise of what's inside. That's what we're going to create for you. Let's start with the basics. Your name choice. Are you using your real name? Well, make sure it's memorable and easy to spell. You know that Meg Ryan's real name is Margaret Mary Emily Annie Hyra. Even Bon Jovi changed his name. His real name is John Francis Bon Jovi Jr. So what if you want to do the same? What if you have a name that's very long or ethnic and hard to pronounce and hard to spell, and you want something that's user-friendly, a pen name? Choose one that fits your genre and your target audience. Let's look at some examples of when a pen name might be appropriate. And there's no denying that if you write erotica or some type of controversial, less than mainstream type content, that you may want to change your name. Privacy is a big reason. Authors do not want their children, friends, grandchildren to know what they write. Genre separation. If an author writes multi-genre, and they do not want their mainstream readers to buy controversial content by mistake, they may use a pen name. Authors will often use terms or slang associated with certain erotica subgenres to attract a specific market. There are a lot of best-selling authors today who use pen names. Karen Slaughter is not one of them. Why would she? She's a New York Times best-selling author. This is her real name, and she writes crime stories and thrillers. I read an interview where she stated, "Gosh, it's a good thing I don't write romance." And that's an author who understands that certain names do not go with certain genres. J.D. Robb is the pen name of Nora Roberts. J.D. Robb separates her thrillers from her romance and fantasy books. Now, there was a time in the not-so-distant past where women were not considered viable mystery crime thriller writers, and many women would use initials so that men would also read their books. I think we've come a long ways since then, but those authors who adopted a name, a man's name, or the initials are still doing that because now they have a following. Dean Koontz is a multi-genre author who has written under 10 pen names. Now, he is primarily known for his horror, mystery thriller type books. They usually have some type of horror or suspense in them. But in his early stages of his career, he did go through a lot of pen names. And that was primarily at the request of publishers. Some of those names were to differentiate between genres, but a lot of publishers requested that he use a different name to go with the books that they were publishing. Which brings us to, why would you use a pen name? Well, as I said, in the past, publishers sometimes requested an author to choose a different name to keep readers from straying to another imprint. So if you had a series of books at publisher A and you just got a contract with publisher B for a similar series, you would not want those readers going to publisher A. You would want to keep them at your publishing house, reading your books. And therefore, it was not uncommon for them to request authors choose a different name. Today, we're more savvy about marketing, and we understand that an author's brand name that is recognized across different publishing houses will still bring in the sales that those publishers are seeking, whether they publish their first 3 books or not. A brand name is extremely marketable once you have gained reader recognition. Now, pen names are still used today in situations like erotica, but there's a growing trend with multi-genre authors and indie authors who have found that using the same name across genres is actually beneficial to growing readership. And readers have become accustomed to seeing authors write in multiple genres. It creates a perception of success. Let's move on to the visual presentation of your name. Font choices matter. It sets the tone for your entire brand. Size and placement create hierarchy. Consistency builds recognition. Here's a mistake that I see a lot of authors make. They choose an elaborate decorative font and it looks beautiful on that book cover in full size. Unfortunately, it does not transfer well to a thumbnail size, which is what most online retailers are using. You don't want your brand name, your name, to be illegible. When you're using your name and choosing the colors, you need to have a strong contrast. Let's take a look at some examples so you have a better idea of what I'm talking about. I randomly selected some books from the cozy mystery genre off of Amazon. All of these books are written by authors with 4.5 to 5 stars. They're award-winning authors. They have a great readership. I wanted to make sure that I chose books and brands by well-known authors. And this is just so we can analyze what they do, what works, what doesn't, and perhaps what could be done better. We'll start with the first one. The Bookstore at Holiday Bay, Once Upon a Mystery, by USA Today bestselling author Kathy Daly. First of all, let's talk about the cozy mystery genre. The covers have a lot of cursive, decorative fonts. They're busy, and they're some of the hardest covers to design and still make your name and book title show up. As I said earlier, your name is an important and powerful part of your brand. However, when we look at the Bookstore at Holiday Bay in the reduced thumbnail size, it is really hard to see Kathy's name. Kathy has used her name in a cursive font, and cursive fonts are very difficult to read in a thumbnail size. What makes it worse is the book cover designer has outlined that font in white, which makes it even harder to read. So to create your brand effectively, if this were your book, I would suggest, number one, making that title just a little bit larger. You can expand the blue emblem that it's put on. That would make it a little bit easier to read in the font. I would definitely not encourage you to outline a dark text in white for a thumbnail size. So at a later date, I will be offering some tutorials on making social media graphic designs as well as ebook covers, headers for your website, your newsletter, etc. Now let's move on to the second book, Sticky Situations. The image is not as busy on this cover. The font is not as decorative, and the author's name is readable. Cozy Mysteries have a tendency to make the author's name a bit smaller, which makes it even harder to read. I would have bolded Emma Ainsley's name. I think that that would have given it a little more presence, especially since it's a bolder font for the title. But what really bothers me about this in the thumbnail size is you cannot read the name of the Cozy Mystery series, which is in that area above the awning. It says Raised and Glazed Cozy Mysteries, and it has 2 pictures of donuts, but that is completely lost in a thumbnail size. So I would have made that banner the length of the awning and made it a little bit larger, because your Cozy Mystery series is very important. It's an important part of branding your book series. You want your name to stand out, bold that, and then the other thing that you can't see is in small print on the door, it says Summer Prescott Books. Those are some things to consider. Let's move on to the next slide, and we have 3 books on this one. And I have them ranked from, I won't say bad, none of them are bad, but I have them ranked from less readable to the best readable. The first one is very difficult to read, the title, Final Taste. Even though they've outlined that font in a darker color to make it more defined, it does not show up. It does not read well against that background. You have spent so much time writing your book. You want people to know the title. That's an important part of your new book release. I would assume that the designer on this cover thought that they could make it stand out better by using a green against the blue, but it really is just the wrong image and font. You could still use the image by perhaps dropping it down a little bit, putting a shadow behind the font. It's not so cursive that it's not readable. It's just too busy behind it. You cannot read it because of the background. That's something to take into consideration if you are writing Cozy Mysteries. Now, the author's name stands out very well. What does not stand out well is the tagline for the Cozy Mystery series. And once again, it's that cursive font that dooms so many Cozy Mystery covers. If you move on to the second one, this one is actually quite good. Tanya Capps is an incredible Cozy Mystery author, very esteemed with readers. Her book designer did a fine job in separating the graphic and allowing some solid colors for both the decorative title font as well as Tanya's name. Now I want you to pay attention. The decorative font is more for the title. Her name is bolder. It's easily read. What is not easily read is her Cozy Mystery tagline. And the third one that I feel is the best and easiest to read is Elle Adams' book. And the reason why is because of contrast, contrast, contrast. You can see the yellow against the cobalt blue, dark purple, depending on the color settings of your phone or your computer. And you have enough of that darker color to really make the decorative font in both her name and the title stand out. I would like to point out her tagline is not in cursive. It is in a serif block type font that is easily readable in a thumbnail size. So whoever designed this cover knew what they were doing and knew how to design it, and they did an excellent job. If you will look at the first 2 books, imagine those taglines in a block style font. Wouldn't they be easier to read? Remember, you only get 6 to 7 seconds to capture a reader's attention. And the last slide maybe one of the hardest graphics to market your brand, and that's a box set. When you have multiple covers in a very small area, it's hard to make them readable. Her cover designer used white on very colorful backgrounds. So even though the images are different, you know immediately that these are all books by the same author in the same series because the name and the titles are all the same format. This is a great example of branding a box set. You have a bold font, focusing the reader's eyes on box set of 8 books. Readers love box sets. You have a tagline at the top that says Cozy Witch Mysteries Special Edition. What I would have liked to have included in the top would have been the author's name and the fact that they are a USA Today best-selling author. That adds a special bonus that you're a best-selling author. You have consistent quality in these books. So to recap, remember, your author name needs to work on book covers, both full-size and thumbnail, on social media posts, headers for your newsletter, your blog, your website, on business cards. Let's look at some specific examples. One of the things that you'll notice about James Patterson's style and brand is it has evolved over the years. And if you look at any long-term author, you'll probably find the same thing. With today's incarnation of James Patterson's brand, he uses a lot of blue. His font is not as thick or bold as it appears on many of his earlier novels. However, it still is the all caps, square, block type font. So he hasn't changed completely. He's just allowed it to modernize and evolve a bit. On his website, he uses a lot of blue. His name is in blue. If you look at his Substack site, his name is in blue, the same type of font. His Facebook page features Alex Cross television series, and it's a mixture of blue and yellow. And then he has the Hungry Dogs Substack blog. He does a lot of interviews. James Patterson is a very interesting man and multifaceted. If you've not looked at his website, I encourage you to do so. Not just his main website, but also his Substack site. He has his hand in a lot of cool endeavors. Now, Nora Roberts is another one whose brand has evolved over the years. When she first started out writing romance, she had more of a blocky type font. It was still decorative, but it was a little thicker. As she has evolved and modernized and written different series, her font has changed slightly. You'll notice that her covers aren't so very different, but her font style of her name is different. She has one that is more plain block type font. It's sleeker now. And then she has one that has a little more swag to it. The tail of the R curls under. She has a new one with the N. It has a little more flair to it. But the same look is there. And that's the consistency. Your brand does not have to match exactly from platform to platform, but it needs to be close enough that people know it's you. If you'll look at the main page here in the green at the top, that is her website, Nora Roberts. If you look to the right, that's a social media post. Also, similar font, Nora Roberts. And then the third image is of many of her books. You can find some of the books that she wrote in like the 1980s, 1990s, early 2000s. And you can see that over time, her font has shifted and changed a little bit. but it still has the distinctive elements that makes her recognizable to this day. Now, notice how each presentation reflects their genre, remains consistent across all platforms, scales well to any size, both in contrast and in visibility, readable fonts, and creates instant recognition. Now let's put all of this information into practical application. Open your checklist that you downloaded last week and go to the author name presentation section. We're going to go through each item together. First on the list is making sure your author name is easily readable in all sizes, no matter what your font. But make sure that font choice reflects your genre and writing style. Now, if you look at these three fonts, it's pretty easy to tell what genre you're referring to. The first one, Janet Strong, can very easily be thriller, suspense, crime, fiction. The second, Jana Hart, romance. And the third one, Jane Starr, well, I think we all know that that's probably science fiction. The next 2 points are super important. Name styling is consistent across all your platforms. If you are using a bold font for mystery thrillers, or if you're using a more decorative font for, say, romance, you want to make sure that style, the colors, the personality is the same on your website, in your newsletter, on your blog, on your social media post. If you are using a signature or handwritten version, as many well-known authors do, this one is J.K. Rowling. James Patterson is actually doing that. Then you want to make sure that there is a version available in your author brand kit. And the last two, make sure your registered domain matches or in the very least includes your author name. If you have not bought a domain name for your author name, I highly encourage you to do this and buy it in various incarnations. For instance, janedoe.com, janedoeauthor.com, janedoebooks.com, author Jane Doe. Sometimes people already have your domain name, or there are brokers that buy up domains and then they want you to pay an exorbitant price to buy it from them. You may not be able to settle exactly for your name, but I'm sure you can get something like Jane Doe Author or Jane Doe Books. And the last point is social media handles are consistent or similar with your domain and or author name. If your domain name is janedoe.com, then if you're posting on YouTube, it would be YouTube at Jane Doe. If you're posting on Facebook, it would be at Jane Doe. That way you have a consistent handle. People know where to look for you because you're the same across all platforms. All right, authors, we covered a lot of information in a short amount of time, but you're not done. There's some action steps I'd like for you to take before next Monday's program. I would like for you to evaluate your current name presentation. Test your chosen fonts in multiple sizes. Check consistency of your name across multiple platforms. For instance, make sure that you are consistent from your website to social media platforms to newsletter to blog. Make sure all of that is consistent. And then document your choices for future use. If there's some things that you'd like to see changed that you think would look better, document it. Let's take a look at it. Next week, we'll explore Pillar 2, Visual Identity. We'll take a deep dive and build on today's presentation to create your complete visual identity. Don't forget to test your name presentation and post your progress in the comments below. I'd love to hear. If you have a specific question, email me at authorbrandstudio@gmail.com, and I promise I will answer every email. If you're new to our community and this is the first video you've watched, I'd like to invite you to subscribe and stay with us. Remember, your name is your first impression. Let's make it count.